What is up, you guys? We are here for our Saturday night secret sermon. This is our Secret Teachings of Jesus series, where we are delving into forbidden literature. We are studying out of the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and we are in the Gospel of Thomas. There is a playlist on my channel. If you are into this kind of thing, you'll love it. It's got hundreds of videos, and I have covered the Gospel of Philip in depth. We took each portion, episode by episode. They as in we, we as in me. We covered the Gospel of Mary and what else? I think the Secret Book of James, but that's been over the course of the last couple of years. So plenty to delve into if you find this interesting. All right. Yes. And all that is under the Secret Teachings of Jesus playlist on my channel, Light Love Magic. So go subscribe to that. And if you like studying like the lost gospels, the Gnostic gospels, things of that nature, also if you're interested, like I do a lot of Kabbalah classes, like I take Kabbalah classes and I studied Zohar through my Kabbalah teachers. And so I'm going to be doing like a Bible study that is through the hermeneutic lens of the deepest mystical interpretation of the Bible. So if you're ever like have been, oh man, I wish I liked reading the Bible more, but it's just so triggering and it just doesn't seem to make sense and all of this whack shit's going on all the time. And I'm like, why is it like this? And then I just give up and get flustered and flabbergasted and throw the book through the window. Then this might be great for you because you can let go of everything that you think you know about reading the Bible and start fresh from this understanding of the approach to the study and the language and all of that. So if you like that kind of thing, my Substack is relatively new. I've been kind of just like chipping away at it in solitude, but there is a paid subscription tier for $6. And so that's like $6 a month. So that's where any kind of like content like that, Secret Teachings, Zohar, our Gnostic studies. I'm going to continue to make more content in that platform. And I'm working on kind of a technical article right now and video that has taken a lot of research and study and like letting it kind of marinate in order to lay the groundwork of our study. But after that, like it's I don't think it's going to take me as long to prepare for the issues or episodes or whatever you want to call them, because of the nature of how the channeling flows through anyway, like when we do these studies. However, because I don't usually prepare necessarily, because I like for the light to come through and not my preconceived notions. So, however, this particular article issue, video write-up is definitely more like objective and factual and technical. And so it's important to get it right. So that's just a little update about what's going on there. So if you're interested in finding me on Substack, I'm Elizabeth Rose on those platforms, Substack and Patreon. All right. My bookmark almost went behind the couch. It was saved. All right. So we are picking up in the Gospel of Thomas, and we are on saying number 20. So context for the format of the Gospel of Thomas. It's not like some of the Gospels that are more like narrative driven, where you've got the Jesus and the disciples and they're going places and they're seeing people and they're doing things and they're talking about things. The Gospel of Thomas is like a record of like specific things that Jesus would say, like sayings or things that he said, or like monologues or speeches he would give. And so It is not necessarily a flowing story as much as it is these numbered sort of like isolated thoughts. Very similar to the Gospel of Philip. That's the way the Gospel of Philip is laid out as well. It's like portions of cryptic text that are like a paragraph long, but those are like, they have titles, they're named, and they're like, you meditate, and they're very esoteric, very cryptic and symbolic, but the truth comes through and revelation comes through as you meditate on these things. So the Gospel of Thomas is similar. It's not about where Jesus went, the miracles that he performed, or that he was divine, or that he died and was resurrected, or any of that. It's just focused 100% on Jesus's actual teachings. Now, the Gospel of Mary, for instance, was more, there were things that happened, scenes that played out. She recalls a vision, like, you know, there's conversation. So, all right. So just to give you a little bit of context to get your bearings if you haven't ever heard anything out of the Gospel of Thomas. Okay, so we're on saying number 20 this week. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And he said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds, for the birds of heaven." Okay, I'm going to read that again. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." He said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds of heaven." All right. So, this is a pretty straightforward idea in a way compared to some of the other times that we've had chart come out, you know, all kinds of things. We don't need chart today. The disciples said to Jesus, "What is heaven's kingdom like?" And first of all, I think that they kept thinking of heaven's kingdom as such a literal idea of like a place where there's streets and places and buildings and assembly halls, but Jesus was always trying to express to people that the kingdom of heaven was something that happened within. Like once we're out of body and we go to the upper realms, it's not the same as in the material world. So we get hung up on material examples and material expressions of things. And so even up to, you know, like well into the ministry, one of Jesus's biggest frustrations with his disciples was that they kept thinking of his kingdom as like something that was going to happen when they like took over the government and they claimed the throne, and then they were going to rule over the people of Israel as like a governing body. And Jesus would get just so flabbergasted because he's like, that's not really what I'm saying at all. And that hasn't been what I've been saying at all. And you're still not understanding that the kingdom of heaven is within you. It's a state that we can arrive at through a process of crucifying our lesser self, our ego self, our lower self, and then resurrecting with Christ consciousness as our true human self, as an awakened soul and spirit. So, the disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And so Jesus said to him, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for the birds of heaven." So that little seed, heaven's kingdom is like a mustard seed. And it's so tiny. In fact, I have a mustard seed. I have a mustard seed that I grew and harvested in my own backyard. And I kept it in this little bottle because, you know, that Jesus also says that if you had faith, even the size of a mustard seed, it could move. You could tell that mountain, get up and move into the sea, and it would move. Look at how tiny that is. Little bitty. You know what that also reminds me of is like when I see this little bitty mustard seed. I'm trying to get into focus because it's so small. I think of an atom, like atomic atoms. Think about the power, the force that is unleashed when you split an atom open. That's just one tiny little quanta of God's pure light. And when we have pure faith, the faith that Jesus was talking about, like faith without a hint of doubt, all it would take is just that little tiny speck of pure power, that pure force opened up to be the force, full force of creation, full force of sovereignty over the laws of nature, right? You know, I've often talked on this channel about how when you joke around, that's almost the most dangerous like time because it's like you're so rife for manifestation. I have made passing jokes before, but like out loud, I've said something and I genuinely wanted it so bad or so clearly without any inner conflict. And I had no conflicting thought that it wasn't possible, that it happened and materialized like in moments. Like, okay, there's this kind of crass story that I was an extra on an indie movie in Nashville. And when you're filming, you have to turn off the air conditioner because it makes noise. So in the heat, like in the summer, you know, filming, it can get really uncomfortable because you're in there with all the lights, you're in there with all these people. And so we were filming in this bar. It was like near my house, like in here in East Nashville. And we were sitting in there and we're waiting for like they're repositioning the shot. So it takes a minute to like move the camera in a different position, swing the lens, get the lighting moved in a little bit, adjusted. So we're waiting for that process. And it was so hot and everybody was just so heavy. And I remember saying to this lady next to me, we had really bonded. She's older. She's like an older salty dog of a woman, you know, that love that kind. And I was like, if it is so hot in here, I would put a popsicle up, you know where. And we all had a good laugh at that. And then like less than 10 minutes later, somebody walked in and they were handing out popsicles to everybody. Like at work, like one time my coworker was like, what are we manifesting today, Liz? And I was like, you know what, let's call it a cake. Let's call it a cake. There's no reason we should have a cake. Why would anybody have a cake from anywhere? And like moments later, our coworker comes through and she's like, hey guys, I'm putting a cake over on the pass. Like I don't know, we brought it from this party that we had, right? And then the way I explain that, because you know how sometimes you want things so deeply and you feel like you're meant to have them in your life and you're like, how come I'm not manifesting this? I've let go, I've surrendered, but like there's something about it that's so heavy, it's so precious that there's like even the tiniest, faintest echo of a, what if it doesn't happen? Or why should it work this time? You know, there's like these like little quiet, distant doubts back there, you know, even if you don't realize it, or maybe like an inner conflicting desire, like I really want this promotion, but like on the inside, you're like, but then you'll lose all your free time and it's not that much money after taxes, you know, like that kind of thing. It's always like a tug of war. But in the case of the popsicle or the cake, and then this has happened so many countless times, I can't even recall them all. But the point is that in those moments, I made a joke. I genuinely wanted the popsicle. I genuinely wanted the cake. There was nothing in me that didn't think that I deserved or it wasn't possible. Like, it was just like such a laughable moment that there was no time for conflict. It was just pure mustard seed of faith. And in moments, a wish was materialized. Your wish is my command. The universe, that's why the universe doesn't want you to be so hung up on how something is coming or the form that it's going to arrive in, because then you pigeonhole the universe, and the universe is like, well, I could have delivered the essence of this wish in many different ways through many different routes, but you're the co-creator here, and you think it has to come through this one job or this one person or this one sort of way that this will come into fruition that you can imagine. And so we're kind of limited to what what hills you're dying on with this, right? So that's why it's like, okay, it's good to just be more in tune with the core essence of something. And that's when we talk about certainty as a level of faith, Emunah, which is faith beyond reason, faith beyond doubt. It transcends reason. It's not like pre-logic where you're just crazy and totally delusional and you have no logic and no reasoning, right? Like you've got the facts, you've got the statistics, you know the lay of the land, but you don't care because you know that miracles are possible. And you know that given the right circumstances, you have experienced life above the laws of nature and outside of the laws of nature at times. So you know it's possible, right? So we're not limited by that thinking. So, okay. I know that I know logically this thing shouldn't work, or, the situation looks bleak. But what certainty says is, but I know that miracles are possible. And I have a relationship with God. And God wants good things for me. And even the hard things can become good things if I determine in myself to maintain that muscle, that consciousness of certainty, of faith, it's determination. It's almost like determined Deluluville, right? But it's not, right? Because that can be reckless and dangerous as well. But it's like knowing in your heart that even though you don't know how things are going to play out, you don't know how, you don't know why, you don't know when, you don't know from who, but God can work through the situation and is working through the situation in your favor no matter what. Because just knowing that, just believing that and declaring it, it like activates that omnipresence. It activates this little mustard seed. This little mustard seed is dormant. This little mustard seed respects your free will. This little mustard seed doesn't want to do the work for you because that's not fulfilling to the vessel. So this little mustard seed waits for you to realize that it's there in every situation for you to activate it. Oh, okay. The reason why I kept my own mustard seed was because I grew that mustard seed and I had to harvest it. That was a process. Your faith, you grow your faith through intention, through determination, through disappointment, through cringe, through it all. You get knocked down, you get back up. That faith, it becomes stronger. As your consciousness grows stronger, your faith becomes stronger. As you survive yet again and you get back up and another door opens and a way is made for you, your faith is strengthened. And you eventually start to see little miracles. And then your faith is confirmed. And then you're emboldened. But sometimes you have to choose faith before you ever see any evidence. When this mustard seed goes into that prepared soil, we don't see instant results, right? Think about like the motivational, testimonials, right? Whether it be religious people found Jesus and they're giving their testimony, or they found, the diet and they're giving their testimony, or they found the right business plan and they're, joining this thing and they're giving their testimony. We love like a quick, big bang, like sudden success, don't we? We love to see the results. That's sexy, instant gratification. But that's not how it works. The kingdom of heaven doesn't work that way. The kingdom of heaven doesn't give you overnight results, right? Only maybe if you had, there were those 10 years, those 10,000 hours before that, though, that overnight result that you get when it's really coming from the higher, the heavens, from the light, it happens on the other side of a real process, right? So maybe, it's not that you tried this thing for the 10,000 hours and it finally worked. Maybe you've tried everything a million times and nothing ever works, and then you finally get your shot. But that's not because it was just earned, it came without earning and it just happened overnight. You knew all the hits you had to take to get there. You knew the process and the growth that came on the other side of it. So it's like something can happen quick, right? But it can only happen quick and bring fulfillment if the soil is very prepared, meaning you've already gone through times in your life where you've had to learn the hard lessons. And now you've prepared yourself with that time of difficulty. And so now you are prepared. You are prepared for a success to come and really appreciate it and have the stamina and the skills and the wisdom to see it through. But if you get successful like that, a quick success too early on, it'll just ruin you. You'll squander it away. You won't appreciate it. You won't have the chops. You won't have the groundedness and the wisdom to maintain or to maintain the fulfillment, right? So the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, and it gets planted. And when it gets planted in prepared soil, that can turn into a plant or a bush or even the tallest tree. This little seed can make a huge tree from this when it's planted in the right soil, but it doesn't happen overnight, right? When we have an initial, like when we have like a coming to Jesus moment and we turn things around initially, and it's the same for like when you start doing Kabbalah, when you start studying Kabbalah, like you'll have an initial period of like these miraculous things that come through, and it's exciting and it gets you motivated. You get a taste of what's possible and you want to keep going. But then that's just like the introductory welcome, orientation. It's like, welcome to campus. We love you. It's going to be so much fun. There's no homework yet, right? But when you become a real serious student, that is totally different. It becomes, writing papers and cramming and going to the library and going to the dark room for hours and printing photos, whatever it is you're doing there, right? It's a grind, it's a study, but you love it, So when you have this coming to Jesus moment or a spiritual revelation, it's like at first, it feels like it fills you up. It gives you this like high, you're on top of the world, the adrenaline, the rush, all the lights in the vessel. But then you kind of have a crash because eventually the process starts and tests come, and it's like you're not just in this state of harmony and bliss all the time. Life challenges you. It grows your faith though. So it's a process. It's like the seed goes into the ground, and it's like the seed is like willingness. It's like I'm broken. I've tried this alone. I can't do this by myself. It's too hard and it's too heavy. And no matter how much strength and force I put into this, I can't make it happen by myself. So I'm broken and I'm willing. I am willing to accept that I need Christ to help me become a greater person, to awaken my soul, to change my consciousness, to help me be reborn, a new creature. And then I need God to animate my efforts so that God breathes the breath of life into what I'm doing so it can be fruitful, so it can be fulfilling, right? And you know what? Just because what you're doing isn't immediately blessed or fruitful does not mean you're cursed. And it does not mean that God is not behind that. Because if you are a true disciple or a true student of wisdom, of spirituality, then you know that tests come with the territory. You're not just trying to bypass all that. So you can accept it in with a certain sort of like context and understanding. So you're not necessarily going to plant a mustard seed and get product overnight. You're not going to be able to yield more mustard seeds for cooking. You're not going to have mustard greens overnight. You're not going to have a tree overnight, but it begins a process. The willingness opens the heart. And then you start allowing, even if you're just willing to choose another thought, willing to choose to feel differently, willing to open yourself to forgiveness, willing to open yourself to allowing Christ to soften the hard calluses and to purge the toxic buildup. You know, I always laugh at myself all the time. I'm like, I'm such a wretch. You really need amazing grace, because like, even, you know, trying as hard as we can to just be better, it's like, for 10 minutes we'll do all right, and then we'll backslide again. I'm a wretch. I'm already a wretch again. Like 10 minutes after I was not going to be a wretch, I found grace. Once was blind and now I see. 10 minutes later, wretch again, right? So it's a process. You know, and we have to believe that, like, yes, because I see this seed and I know what it is and I know what the potential of it is, right? I can't judge that this seed is never going to amount to anything. I don't know what it could amount to. It could amount to a tree or a plant that just continues to bring forth more seed, that brings forth more fruit, right? So we have the willingness to plant the seed. And if it's in prepared soil, then it will grow into something. It will yield something, right? However we tend to the plant, you know, it will give back to us what we give it, right? So the disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And he said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for the birds of heaven." Now, a mustard seed, it's the smallest of seeds. Now, think about when you are willing, you say, like, you know, you're like, I want Jesus to change my life. I want to grow my soul. I want to be a spiritual person. I want to grow my connection to the Creator. I want to become more like the Creator and less like my lower nature. You'll be going through the world and business as usual, but then you'll be in a moment and you'll feel a tiny tug. You'll hear a little whisper that's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have handled that way. I'm wanting to change." And that's one of the things that I want to change. I should have handled that better. And maybe that's totally different than what you would have thought before. So then the next time you start to do that again, it's like the voice gets you a little bit again. And you're like, "Oh, maybe I can stop myself before I go into like, meh, and dial it back a little bit and handle it differently. And maybe I'm still not doing this perfect and whatever, but it's like you caught yourself, do a little bit better this time, do a little bit better the next time. Gradually, change is possible. You know, when people want to change and they ask for the help from God and from Jesus and from, you know, their heavenly helpers, the heavens will help you. When your prayers are, "Please help me transform," not "What can you give me?" your prayers will begin to be answered. When I prayed that God would help me open my heart, all kinds of things that were very emotional and heart opening and opportunities for things like that came up through the week. And it was opening my heart. It was like all of a sudden all this emotion was like happening. That's what happens when your heart is open. You feel So when you ask for things like that, your prayers get answered, right? When you ask for a virtue, you will be given that process, honey, straight off the bat. No waits. Come straight to the front. You want to pray for material payoff? That takes a while. Which goes back to my point before, like, we love these, like, big, grandiose, testimonies that are like, oh, I was, in the dregs and I was a wretch. And then, I found Jesus and suddenly everything turned around. And it's this big, clean, neat story wrapped up in an inspiring bow. But for the most part, it's not like that. It's average, mundane life. And average things that slowly drive us crazy and into bitterness and madness and anger and resentment. But we have these moments where we have these little tiny seeds that we have a choice, that we can plant, that we can harvest, that we can hold on to, that we can grow. And it's those little moments where that seed is like, keep believing, don't give up on yourself. Could have done that better. Don't, throw your self-worth away in shame. Just do better next time. Just try again. Like, don't give up on yourself. Don't throw away yourself. Don't, talk down to yourself. Don't cast yourself off. Don't consider yourself a throwaway. Don't give up. Doesn't matter how many times you failed. I told somebody tonight, I was like, you know what? Every year I get a wild financial hair up my ass around this time, around July. And I'm not embarrassed about it. And this year I've got another one. I'm going to try it. And I told this girl, I was like, I failed at everything. I'm not even afraid of that anymore. I'm not even embarrassed about embarrassing I am at this point. People laugh at me all they want, whatever. I'm going to try it. I've got nothing to lose. And I'm willing to lose whatever risk that I'm calculating and willing to put into this thing. And it's funny, because the thing that I'm talking about, there were several other people at work that were all on the same train. And we were like, okay, we're all thinking this at the same time. Like, this is one of those synchronicities. Keep an eye out for synchronicities. What does our readings always tell us this, right? Let friends help you. Like, all these things keep coming up. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you got to hold on to the mustard seeds, because they'll get crushed. They'll get thrown. But you know what? When they get thrown and tossed, half the time they take root. It's funny about the mustard seeds that I was growing in my garden that year when I harvested this seed. Those seeds are so hardy. They will just spread everywhere. I've had mustard greens growing up just randomly all over my yard and in every single planter. I don't even know how the seeds get there. I guess the birds move them around, but they grow up in everything. They're determined. So if you give faith just a little bit of an inch, it'll take a mile. It'll sprout up everywhere. It'll be prolific, right? The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." He said to them, "It's like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds of heaven." Birds of heaven, they're like the messengers of the light. When you grow your faith, it becomes the shelter that you take shade in when you're under that direct, harsh, pressure of life. You take shade. When we're under the direct impact of the light of the Creator, those are usually the intense times of the year. It's just like when you're out on the water and you're under the beating sun, it's like you're getting burnt up and you need that shade. There's in the Psalms where it talks about, that I take shelter under the shade of like the wing or the feathers, right? They cover you in my feathers. The sukkah that we sit under during Sukkot, the shade that is the covering of the shelter of being kept, right, by God's grace. So that faith is what shelters us during those times of pressure, and it reminds us, oh wow, this isn't just a challenge. These are times of opportunity where I can reveal the greatest light. I can grow trees from these seeds that are being planted during this time. seeds of belief, right? Seeds, these mustard seeds, were planted like last holiday season. I remember because me and my coworkers were working this party and somebody was giving, it was like a bunch of people were meeting. It was like a group of people meeting for this thing that the organization that they were with. They were having a dinner and they were giving, everybody's giving speeches about stuff and going, around and telling about their experience. And I was kind of cynical because I'd heard it all before, but my coworkers were fresh. They hadn't heard it all before. So they were hearing it with fresh ears. And then it kind of circled around recently, the same vibe of thing. And I was open this time. My soil was prepared for that seed. And sometimes as a gardener, I'll plant seeds and they won't sprout that season, but they'll sprout the next growing season. They wouldn't come up like things that I planted a couple of seasons ago, a couple of summers ago. They finally started sprouting in random, planters. I'm oh, I remember planting that before. It never came up. Right? So sometimes it has to be the right time. Sometimes the seed just needs time to break open. Sometimes the soil, right? I've added compost to the soil since then. I've nurtured my soil since then. I've gone through a lot of, processes in life since then. A lot of hours working and putting effort forth and trying and feeling like I wasn't getting the return on the effort, right? And so maybe my soil is more willing now to listen to some new ideas, right? And so that's how God gets in, and that's how Christ gets in, and that's how faith gets in. It's a little seed that's planted, and it grows over time. But you know what? How many times are we still clinging to the ego, and we're still stubborn and determined to hold on to our truth, limited truth. And we stay stuck, and that seed doesn't sprout until the soil is ready. So many times you feel like you want to work on a relationship, or you want to work on one of your troubling qualities. Say you have some vices or some, personality issues that are a little bit rough around the edges. And, you kind of try to refine it at times in your life, but it's just not, you don't get anywhere with it, or you backslide, or you just weren't ready. You weren't hungry enough yet. Life hadn't kicked you hard enough to break your spirit. When you see someone an equestrian person breaking a wild horse, and that horse does not want to put on that saddle, and it does not want the mouthpiece, and it does not want someone sitting on it. And it just bucks, and it just fights, and it cocks, and it kicks until, it throws that person off of it. But eventually that horse gets broken. And that's what we are. We are the horse that doesn't want to get broken. But the thing is that once we learn to accept the saddle, we have all this purpose, and the horse enjoys, going on, having a ride and doing these things, and it bonds with its master, or whatever, however you want to put it, its horse wrangler. But it takes breaking that stubbornness of wanting its own way, because the thing is that a horse is a beast of burden. It's the purpose of a horse, when brought into the context of usefulness, is to work with, the plan, the greater plan, the bigger plan. It's not just what the horse wants to do. I want to go my own way. No, you have to take me to this destination, right? And so that's what we have to do with our inclination through our journey, through growing our mustard seeds. We have to train our inclination. We have to be able to restrict our initial inclination and refine it and choose our God, our divine inclination, our God-given inclination, our more Christ-like inclination. But it takes a discipline, it takes a process. But yes, when the Bible says that Abraham saddled his donkey, and when the prophecies talk about the Messiah coming in, riding in humble, and riding on a donkey, like all those mentions of these great sages, these righteous souls seated on donkeys, it has nothing to do with the fact that instead of driving like a Cadillac Escalade or something, that they rolled in like I don't know, a Subaru. It's symbolic. It means that the donkey, what do we know about donkeys? They're hard, they're difficult, they're stubborn, they want to go their own way. You gotta like kick them, and you're lucky to get up the hill where I always think of people riding donkeys in the Grand Canyon, you know. Donkeys, they're stubborn. They're beasts of burden. They're useful once you can break them and get them to do what you need them to. But the donkey represents our natural inclination, the way that we're naturally inclined, the way that it's easy for us to be, you know. Oh, it's easy for me to just be nice and passive and not create a stir because that scares me. I don't like to offend people because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't keep them pleased, right? That's a natural inclination. A natural inclination might be to be excessive and have addictive tendencies and overdo it. A natural inclination might be to, be hypercritical and judgmental. A natural inclination might be to pop off and sass back. A natural inclination might be to just generally be rebellious. A natural inclination might be to be absolutely obedient and never question authority. So whatever is your just sort of easy nature, we've been put in this world to transcend beyond that. And so it's about bringing into balance and sort of reaching past what comes naturally and challenging ourselves to maybe do what comes less naturally. So when someone has saddled their donkey, it means that they can restrict their natural given inclination. Now, a lot of times that inclination might be to reactive behavior, to be reactive or affected by a situation, right? It might be like that egoic response that we are, and that's kind of when it's more obvious. But sometimes it's like the people-pleasing methods, and I just, I want to be passive and avoidant, keep the peace. I want to be nice. And in spirituality, nice doesn't necessarily get you off the hook. Sometimes that gives you away. Tikkun is tikkun. Anything can be tikkun if it's your natural inclination. So saddling your donkey, it means you're able to restrict your initial inclination, your natural inclination, your egoic inclination, your inclination of wanting gratification and relief for the flesh. The instant gratification of I need to control and fix this now instead of giving it some space for miracles to play out, So let's read this again. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And he said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for the birds of heaven," right? When we tap into that level of certainty, that faith that's called Emunah, where it's not like, oh, well, I hope and I believe. It is certainty. And it's not the kind of arrogant certainty that has no humility, because we've seen that kind of certainty. That's just more like hard-headedness and stubbornness and hubris and arrogance. But there's a different kind of certainty that is humble. It's like, I can't do this on my own. I know God can work through the situation. I don't know how. And obviously I know that the situation looks bleak. I'm not irrational. I'm not insane. I can see what the material realm is showing me here. But I believe in a God who is not limited by the material realm or time or space. God is completely unlimited, and God can move through the situation, even in the worst case scenarios. God can use that as a springboard to launch me into greatness. If I hold on to that certainty, I don't need to know how it's going to happen. I don't need to know how it's going to come. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't need to add up. It doesn't need to be logical, because all I need is a mustard seed of pure faith that is uninterrupted and undiluted by doubt and limiting beliefs and inner conflicting desires. If I can just believe that something is possible, it is possible. But that requires letting go of doubt, right? There's also a couple of footnotes here. So I'm going to read these to you just in case they are references to go into additional reading if you want. So the disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And he said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds of heaven." So 45 down here, the Coptic text reads, I can't read that. It's weird letters and it's like Saul. I don't know. It's Coptic, so it doesn't matter. We can't read it. Embedded to read, and then it kind of spells it in some other very difficult letters to decipher. And then the other footnote was number 46, and that says Matthew 13, 31, and 32. So that's probably when he's talking about the mustard seed to the disciples before. And then in Luke 13, 18 through 19. And then again in Mark chapter 4, verses 30 through 32. So again, if you want to go into more of Jesus talking about the mustard seed metaphor, that is Matthew 13, chapter 13, verses 31 and 32. There's a reference made in Luke chapter 13, 18 and verse 18 and 19. And then the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verses 30 through 32. Now let's read this one more time and then we are finito. So this is saying number 20. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what heaven's kingdom is like." And he said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on prepared soil, it produces a large plant and becomes a shelter for birds of heaven." Birds of heaven, messengers of heaven, right? They're the intermediaries from material into the upper realms, right? And that is all for tonight, you guys. I will see y'all tomorrow for our weekly energy oracle forecast, where we will be getting basically the spiritual weather for the week ahead, see what kind of general themes might be out there waiting for us. All right, well, until then, peace be with you. Ciao.